Hi, everyone. So I guess this is rolling. Could you please tell me in the chat if you can hear me well? If you can just say yes, just so I know that the microphone is working right. I see that the webcam is working. Just want to make sure that the microphone is working before going further. Yes, great, awesome. So right before we start, I've set a little poll that you can answer right before we start. So when it comes to JavaScript, what do you prefer? Do you prefer object orientation or functional programming? And you'll see later why this can be interesting and why this is important. All right, I'm seeing a few things coming. Lots of functional programmers here. Interesting. All right. I'll start sharing the presentation. Hopefully you can still respond to the poll while I'll do that. Otherwise, yeah, never mind. All right. No, I can't. All right. Let's give it an extra minute and then we'll start the presentation. So far, it's pretty much clear cut. All right. Object orientation, functional programming. I'll give you 10 seconds. 5 seconds. All right, let's get it short. Nice. All right, let's start the presentation. Let me share my screen quickly. And we are rolling. You should be seeing my slides. Yes, all right, awesome. So hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Dayan. I'm a software engineer at Algolia. And today I'm going to talk to you about building open source software and learning from early mistakes. So in early 2018, I published a small project on GitHub called Dinero.js. And Dinero is like Moment.js, right? But for money. So it wraps monetary values and it lets you manipulate them safely. So I built Dinero because I worked at a fintech startup and the way we handled money was extremely hazardous. So after scratching my own itch, I decided to make it open source. And after 2 years of existence, over 400 commits and 29 releases, it is time to release a V2 to fix the design issues of the V1. Because after all, rewriting everything every 2 years is what us developers do best, right? But how do you craft an impactful new major version? How do you make it worth your time? So if you think of popular projects, many of them started becoming interesting around the second major iteration. Think of React, Vue.js, Symfony, Angular, etc. A V1 is often experimental. It is an excited new kid on the block, and it's coming with big ambitions, but a lot of flaws. And it has no experience in the real world, but it thinks it knows everything, right? And it wants to do it all. And Dinero is a relatively popular project. It works well, users like it, and it's being used in several applications in production. And when I interviewed for Algolia, where I'm currently working, I did my final presentation on Dinero.js. So it's my pet project. I like it, I'm proud of it. However, it has many design flaws. And most come from inexperience, my own inexperience, assumptions, and above all things, a lack of vision. And you know what? That's fine because that's usually the purpose of a V1. So we're going to do a tour of the most notable issues. We'll see what happened, how they could be fixed, and what there is to learn. So I will keep a little bit of time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. I'm going to hide the questions now and reply to them all at the end. So don't hesitate to post questions during the presentation. And if I did not answer them already during the talk, I will reply to them at the end, right? All right, let's start. So the first issue of Dinero is that it uses numbers to represent amounts. So I know what you're thinking. Wait up. So I wrote Dinero.js so users don't rely solely on numbers, especially floats, to represent money. In Dinero.js, you use numbers to represent amounts, not the entire object. And this is not a pattern that I invented. This is a pattern that Martin Fowler invented, and I believe this is still very relevant. However, using numbers, the type number, has its own set of limitations. So as you may already know, JavaScript uses floating point arithmetic to represent numbers. So when you try making calculations in a language that uses floating point arithmetic, you get inaccuracies. This is why when you do 0.1 plus 0.2, you don't get 0.3, you get 0.3000004. That's because in floating point arithmetic, the way those floats are represented, you don't have enough space, basically. And I have a whole talk about that topic, by the way, which I will link at the end of the presentation. If you're interested, it goes much more in depth into that. And this is not something that you have with integers. They are immune to that problem. So you can do 1 plus 2 and then divide the result by 10, and you will get the right amount, the amount that you expect. And so in Dinero, we avoid that issue by requiring that you represent amounts with integers in minor currency units. So for example, to represent 50 euros, you set the amount to 5,000 in cents. And arithmetic on integers are safe, so it's fine. It's okay. You can add up to that. You can subtract, you can multiply. There is no problem with that. So we're good. We're smarter than floating point math. Awesome. Well, the thing is, something that I did not realize back then that there is another side to the floating point math coin. Because, for example, you cannot represent amounts below or above a certain threshold. So if you do number.maxSafe integer or minSafe integer, you will get the minimum and maximum number that you can represent with this type. And that's because there is not enough space in the model in floating point math to represent higher than that. And as you can see, that sounds like a reasonable threshold. When you look at it, it's like 9 quadrillion. It's like, okay, like when are you going to represent money that is that high? Well, thing is, remember that first we're expressing amounts in minor currency units, right? Amounts take more room than when you represent them in your head. You don't say 50, you say 5,000. So it takes a lot more space. Also, think of use cases like stock exchange applications or exchange rates between very weak and very strong currencies, or even better, cryptocurrencies. I don't know if you've ever played a little bit with cryptocurrencies, but for example, Ethereum, which is a very popular cryptocurrency, can represent up to 18 decimal places, right? So here, you can count, it would not be enough to represent Ethereum coins. So this limit becomes a serious issue in those very specific use cases. And there are several ways around it today. You can use native begins, which is the latest JavaScript primitive type. Or if you need to support environments that don't yet support begins, you can use strings, or you can use third-party libraries like Decimal.js or Big.js or something like that. So that saves a lot of things. And wait a little. And in Dinero, Dinero objects delegate calculations to a calculator object. So this is a nice pattern because it abstracts the arithmetic logic into the calculator and outside of the Dinero core. The problem is that in V1, the calculator is a hard dependency of the Dinero function. It's imported manually, basically. So that kind of defeats the purpose of the pattern, doesn't it? A much smarter approach would be to inject the calculator into a factory function, which itself generates the Dinero function, and then expose this factory to users. This way, users can implement and inject their own calculator using Begins, third-party libraries, whatever. So you see here, for example, they would be importing decimal, then they would be building their own calculator, implementing each function, and passing it to a factory, create Dinero, which would return a function, which then would let them create Dinero objects using their decimal library. And that would be much, much better, because with this approach, the library does not make a choice for users. It does not couple the library with a third party. And that's something that people ask me a lot. Like, can you support Begin? Can you support Decimal.js? Well, that's not actually something that you want to do. First, because it's not safe. You don't control that external dependency. You don't know if it's outdated, and you don't want to add that bloat to a library. Also, there is a performance cost to using strings, Begins, Decimal.js, etc. So what you want to do is provide same defaults and let users extend the library for their specific use case and make that choice for themselves, which is exactly what will happen in V2. A second issue with Dinero V1 is that it does not handle different exponents. All right, so what the hell is an exponent? So a little bit of money theory here. So most currencies that we use in the world are decimal, and some of them have minor currency units. The exponent is a way to express the relationship between the major and the minor units of a decimal currency. So here an example to make it more concrete. A euro can be broken down into 100 cents, right? And a cent is the smallest chargeable amount in euros. Euros are a decimal currency, right? So it means that the number of cents in a euro is a power of 10. And in euros, to get from 100 to 1, you multiply it by 10 to the power of 2, or 100. So this makes 2 the exponent. So to be clearer, basically, to decide what the exponent is, you get the power of 10 by which you want to multiply to have from the major currency unit to its representation in minor currency unit. And basically, when you accept amounts in minor currency units, you need the exponent. You need that information so you can return the object in units or format it as a human readable string. So the exponent, it allows you to retrieve the factor by which to divide the raw amount. In the example here, when I have 5,000 in euro, I want to know that I have to divide it by 10 to the power of 2 to get the human readable amount. But the problem is that I did not take into account something that may sound simple, but that not all decimal currencies have an exponent of 2. And I don't know if you knew, but I didn't know. This is the Iraqi dinar. This is the official currency of Iraq. It's a regular decimal currency. But unlike the US dollar or the euro, one Iraqi dinar is composed of 1,000 fils. Fils are the minor currency unit of an Iraqi dinar. And that means that the exponent of the Iraqi dinar is 3 and not 2. Unfortunately, when designing V1, I make an assumption of an exponent of 2 for every decimal currency. And of course, I hard-coded it. And so now we're screwed. So that's actually salvageable because in Dinero V1, you can pass a precision. So I put this mechanism in place to let users represent amounts below the smallest minor currency unit. Let's say you sell bags of nails, right? And you can sell 100 of them and you sell the bag for 5 cents. Well, if you are working in a billing application where people need to be able to provide the amount for a single nail, even though they cannot charge for it because it's below the smallest chargeable unit, they still need to be able to represent that amount. And that's why I put this mechanism in place. And that's actually interesting because it shows you that this use case that may sound exotic to you was a use case that I had. And so because I had it, I took it into account. But on the other end, because I was mostly handling dollars and euros, I did not think about different exponents. But the thing is, with this mechanism, you can, because it overrides the exponent, you can use it to circumvent the issue. So that's not ideal, right? But it works. So the point of Dinero initially was to give monetary values a data structure to accurately represent them, right? And the thing is that same should go for currencies. And in Dinero V1, it takes currency as strings. But the problem with strings is that it does not provide much information. Also, it has another problem, is that it couples the library to the native internationalization API. But we will discuss that later on. A much cleaner approach would be to create actual currency objects, to design specific value objects for currencies, which can carry useful information such as the base or the exponent, and to pass this to Dinero objects rather than a string. Another issue with Dinero right now is that it expects a REST API for conversions. All right, what does that mean? Well, so in Dinero V1, you can convert a Dinero object from one currency to another with respect to exchange rates. But where does the exchange rates come from, right? That's exactly the problem. It expects, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but it expects that you fetch them from a REST API, and Dinero actually does the data fetching for you. What does that look like? So here's what a conversion with all the options look like. So you can move most of it in global configuration, but the problem remains the same. The library is doing way too much and it's making way too many assumptions. So here, to give you an idea, you have a Dinero object in euros and you want to convert it to XBT, I think it's Bitcoin, and you pass options. And in the options, you have an endpoint, you have a property path to find the rates in the response. You can pass headers, you can pass a rounding mode. So you see that it's extremely coupled to an idea of an API with an endpoint that you query and a response in JSON. And the problem is that what if rates don't come from a REST API? What if the API response is not shaped as expected? What if you want to cache the rates? Like, this is a really, really poor implementation that I'm guilty of. And you know what? I wrote it in a hurry, and that shows. Definitely it shows. What happened here is that I imagined initially a very simple API. You know, I wanted to be like, you have an object, you do .convert to the destination currency, and that's it. That works. And that also comes from the background of like 2 years ago and maybe like 5 years prior, is that if you look at JavaScript APIs back then, there was really a strong focus on hide most of the complexity, hide all the complexity that you can build those facades a la jQuery, right? And those kinds of patterns have proven themselves to be limiting, and you see a lot less of them these days. We are giving much more control to developers at the expense of more code on their end. But that was also a trend. There are trends in API design and library design, and that was definitely inspired from those trends, which ultimately don't work in that use case. And it made me want to do too much, because now Dinero V1 has string templating. As you can see here, there is string templating in the endpoint and the property path. String templating, data fetching, there is a wrapper around XHR, everything inside of the core. And that does not make sense. That's not the goal of this library. It should not be doing that. And that shows you the cost of simplicity. Here, the price to pay is a really rigid API, and that's a huge problem because basically it makes the method unusable. A much more flexible solution here is to invert control and let the user provide the exchange rates as they see fit. So whether it comes from an API with whatever protocol, file, cache, that's not Dinero's business. Dinero should care about conversion logic, not data fetching. This part is the responsibility of the user. And I ended up fixing things in V1 by allowing users to pass a promise instead of an endpoint if they want to. They can still pass an endpoint, but they can pass a promise instead. And this increases the complexity in the Surface API and in the source code, but that makes the method usable. So that's an advice that I would have. If you can fix, if you can fix bad design early, you probably should, even though it might not be the ideal API. You'll make things pretty in the next major, but you want to think of users first in making your software usable. If nobody can use your method, nobody cares that it's pretty or not. And that's ultimately the path that I decided to take to fix my early mistakes. Another issue with Dinero, there are so many, is that it relies on the native Internationalization API. I don't know if you know this API, but it's pretty nice. So when you decide to format a Dinero object into something human readable, you may need information that you don't have in the object. So for example, the dollar sign. If you create a Dinero object with an amount and the currency, nothing tells you nothing. You don't have the information of that dollar sign. You cannot retrieve it. So for that, you would need a mapping, right? And usually that, like in libraries like Moment, for example, that usually comes in the form of heavy, annoying to maintain locale files. And so back then I decided, wait, I'm much more smarter than that. I definitely don't want to maintain locale files. And I'm going to rely on the native Internationalization API. So here's what it looks like if you're not familiar with it. This API lets you format numbers as currencies, many other things than currencies, but you can do that with currencies as long as the currency code is indexed in the ISO 4217 norm, which is already a first limitation. So for example, here you have 5, and on every number you have this toLocale string method. You can pass it information, and here it will return it in the right format with the euro sign formatted as a price. That's really nice, as a currency. That's really nice. It also takes a locale to decide what style to format the object with. So for example, in German, you use and in French as well, maybe in Belgium as well, you use a comma as a separator between major and minor currency units. And you put the symbol after the amount separated by a space, contrary to in English, like Great Britain and US, where you put the sign before and the separator is a dot. So the API pretty much does everything for you. So that's nice. Like, who would not love that? And this is what Dinero V1 calls under the hood when you invoke the toFormat method. You can pass options to it, but basically it does that. It just uses toLocale string. Why bother with custom implementation or local files when you have a native API, right? There are many problems with it. First is tight coupling. So the Internationalization API is native, right? So it's not like coupling it to a third party. Yet it locks the library with a specific and complex API, which makes it depend on it and limit it to it. And this is a major issue for both flexibility and compatibility. Basically, the API is dictating what the possibilities are. And because it only recognizes ISO 4217 currencies, if you want to use custom or even make-believe currencies and format them the way you want, you're going to have a hard time. And there are workarounds, but workarounds often are code smells. And that's not something that you want to advertise. Hey, you can't do that, but here is a workaround. That's not, especially when it's showing a flaw, a much deeper flaw in your library. And last but not least, the API is not implemented the same way everywhere. And that's a major issue. I've seen discrepancies between some versions of Firefox and Chrome, for example, but the biggest was in Node.js. Additionally, there is not full support of the API in Node.js because basically it relies on an ICU library, which is extremely heavy. So basically what that means is that if people want to use the library and use this method, basically, this method in Node, they will have to build their own Node.js binary with full ICU support. And that sucks, right? You want to give users the possibility of using those kinds of APIs if they want to, right? It's not like saying, oh, it has to support this method, this array method that has been there for 10 years. You know, it's a really specific and complex API that requires a lot of work beforehand. So you really want to give that possibility to people if they want to. And in that case, that makes them responsible for enabling it in their environment because they know that they want to use it. However, when you're making it a hard dependency and you're asking your users to tailor their environment around your choices, your bad choices, this is a major hindrance. A much more flexible options is to let users decide exactly how to format by passing a render function. So here, basically, they can pass a function. There is an amount that is already rounded in the major currency units, and they can pass rounding mode and digits, and they also get the currency. And they can return whatever they want as a string. So here, for example, it would return the currency code, a space, and 5, right? And if they want to use the Internationalization API, which is awesome, they can write their own adapter for it, right? They can write a function that, again, gives them access to the amount and the currency and use toLocale string inside of their own code. And the beauty here is that they make the choice themselves, and so they're responsible for enabling that, right? You're not forcing it on them, and you're not saying, these are all the prerequisites if you want to use my library. If they don't, or if they have something like they're doing polyfilling, or they are checking whether the API is available before using it, they can still write something custom with their own mappings, for example. So here, as you can see, like we have the currency symbols and they as a mapping, and they have their own manual internationalization function. And that's great because control is fully inverted. Users provide a function and return exactly what they want, and they can specialize it. So instead of locking them in, you're giving them freedom and you're giving them flexibility. So it's a little bit more work on their end, but that's nothing that you can fix. You can't fix with documentation and examples. And on the plus side, their code becomes a lot more expressive. So I don't know how you feel about like magic methods or things that hide a lot of complexity, but it's nice until it's not. And here you have something that you can basically abstract in a module, and so you don't have to see all that code all the time, but you're in power, you're in control, and the library is doing its job. It's giving you a primitive, and it's not making too many choices for you. It's helping you, and it's giving you power, but it's not locking yourself. It's not locking you into usage that does not make sense for you. All right, let's keep on going. So another issue is that you cannot tree shake Dinero.js. So if you are not familiar with tree shaking, basically tree shaking is a process where your bundler, so you will have basically a compile step, a build step, where the code is going to be statically analyzed, and everything that you don't use is going to be removed from the final build. So stuff like Webpack does that, Parcel.js does that. And so the problem is that Dinero.js is object-oriented, and so it has a chainable API. Each Dinero object contains the necessary methods to modify it. Unfortunately, this makes it impossible to tree shake because this is a dynamic pattern. And it means that if you only use a couple methods, you will still get the full API at runtime. And Dinero V1 is not huge, right? It's like 3 kilobytes. It's not going to kill any application, but that's not the point. It's not necessarily the point, at least, because in a full application, it's likely one among many dependencies where you will have a mix of like a React, moment or date functions or Vue or all those libraries, and they add up. It adds up. And Dinero is a small library. Like it's really not as important as other dependencies. So it's still adding 3 kilobytes, and you're adding all that, and ultimately it bloats your application. And I believe personally that it's normal for application developers to care about bundle size and to be wishing that they can remove anything that they don't use, because it gives them control. It gives them full control, which is something that you want to do as a library developer. You want to put the control in the hands of the developers using it. You don't want to have some sort of nasty side effects on their application. And yeah, Chainable APIs are nice, but they're incompatible with tree shaking. And that's why you cannot tree shake something like jQuery, for example, is because it's dynamic. You cannot statically decide what's being used and what's not. So you can fix this, and that's why I asked you the question earlier, with a much more functional API. So here, look, I will show you the before after. This is the same object, but here you have the methods on the object, and here you're importing functions, right? So Dinero objects no longer contain all the methods. Users import functions and pass Dinero objects to them. And this makes the library actually fully tree shakeable, right? Because all the functions are imported statically and they are pure functions. And of course, like for people who've been using Dinero so far with the Chainable API and who like that, that's a big change. Like that would be something huge to impose to people. And that's why in Dinero.js v2, both APIs will be available. There will still be the Chainable API, and there will be a functional API. So this way, users who like the chainability or don't care about bundle size, let's say they're using it in Node.js on the server, they don't care, they can go with the classic implementation. Users, on the other end, who prefer functional programming or who care about shaving bytes off can go with the functional version. So that's the best of both worlds. And you have a core with all the implementation, and then you have the plumbing in both implementation, and that works well. I already started working on it, and I can tell you that it's really, really nice. So yeah, that's something that you can do, especially today. I wouldn't say that everybody needs to provide 2 APIs, but if you want traction in your library, you need to still stay aware of what the trends are and what people want. Functional programming is becoming much more popular in JavaScript. Tree shaking applications is important, especially now that we have full JavaScript libraries, like full JavaScript applications. So yeah, that's something that you can think of. That's not actually that hard, but it's more work. So that's something to consider. And finally, it's written in JavaScript. So it's not to say that JavaScript sucks, I should have written it in COBOL or whatever. No, it's about the fact that it's dynamically typed. So I wrote Dinero.js in early 2008. 2018, not 2008, that would be a lot. So coincidentally, this was when TypeScript started growing really fast. Like it was really a tipping point. And at that time, I did not know TypeScript. I was also writing Dinero.js to fix a problem that I had in a JavaScript application. So I went with JavaScript, right? But in 2020, TypeScript is kind of unavoidable. You cannot that's the de facto superset, like the statically typed superset of JavaScript. It's here, and people are using it, and people are asking for it. And Dinero has type definitions on definitely typed, but the problem is that they're not always in sync, and also they can be wrong since there is no compile step to check them. And personally, I hate writing the same thing twice. And maintaining type definitions is the perfect example of that. So I just don't do it. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not the one who is maintaining the types because I just don't want to. It's annoying. It's not reliable. It's bound to be outdated. So I just don't do it. And that's not great for the TypeScript community because they want to have something that they can rely on. So it's definitely not a good solution. And you know what? I believe that it's great that definitely type exists, but it does not scale, especially for non-trivial projects with a non-trivial API surface, and I might add, and not a huge following who's here to maintain the type definitions. Definitely, that's not scalable. And on the other end, static typing is wonderful when you're authoring libraries. In Dinero, there are a lot of data manipulation, transformation, there is dependency injection, there are optional parameters, and so on. And that's where bugs love to hide in dynamically typed languages. So static typing lets you fail fast, and it removes an entire class of issues. And if you're serious about catering to the TypeScript community, writing your code in TypeScript is the most sustainable solution. It doesn't mean that you have to write things in TypeScript. I would never go and say, oh, you should write everything with TypeScript. No, that's not true. But in my case, people who are likely to use Dinero are mostly banking applications, finance applications, and they're usually using TypeScript themselves for security, for a bit more safety, I would say, more than security. And so it makes sense to cater to that crowd. And having the library in TypeScript helps also both the JavaScript and TypeScript community. So it's win-win. It's more work, though. It's more work. It slows down the process of writing code in many cases, even when you get good at it, because there are some use cases. For example, I was telling you about functional programming. Try to write a recursive query function and type it properly, and then send me the code. Thank you. It's really, really hard. It's extremely hard. But it's also, in many cases, it's worth it. All right. So we've reviewed many, many flaws of the library. So probably you have a question in your mind, which is, what happened? Like, how can there be so many flaws? Some of them may even look like rookie mistakes to some of you, especially if you're a library developer. What was I thinking? Can I even code? Should you even trust me with my code? Well, there are many reasons for that. The first one is that it was my very first serious library. I have older projects on my GitHub account, but it was the first time that I was actively building something for other people to use. And the thing is, making a library is not easy. It may sound easy when I walk you through the solutions because I took a lot of time to think about them and to ponder the pros and cons. But building primitives for people to use requires experience. It's a whole field of expertise. And I did not have experience as a library developer. Also, I was a lot less experience as a general developer 2 years ago than now. Now, would that prevent me from writing something? No, definitely not. It's gonna make me make mistakes, but I would never decide, because I don't think I'm experienced enough, I'm not going to open source anything. Otherwise, you never open source anything. And this led me to have no real world experience with that specific domain. I built something to fix my problems, the problems that I was experiencing in the app that I was building in the company where I was working. And I did it well. It worked well for my use case, for our use case. But building something to fix most people's problems is another story, because you can rarely think of other people's use cases before they tell you. And unless you're interviewing a whole bunch of different people before you code, the best feedback will come in your GitHub issues. And for V2, I actually took the time to like wade through all those issues and take them into account. I also interviewed developers who work at fintech startups, and that's great because I have a lot of material to build something that I believe will fix issues and be scalable and will work in the long run. But would have I done that for a V1? Probably not. If you're spending that much time working on preparing something, it also diminishes the chances that you will actually ship something, that you will put something out there, especially when you're inexperienced because you don't have that discipline and you don't have that stamina. So that's great for a V2, but no regret for a V1 because it also gave me the experience of thinking of issues, responding to people on GitHub, take into account their feedback, decide what makes sense and what does not make sense, think of solutions that can work for many instead of catering to every single small use case. And that's extremely valuable. And finally, there's the problem of the assumptions that you make. So when you have your shoulder to the wheel, you're working, you have your nose against what you're doing, it's very easy to lose track of the big picture. And I made a lot of assumptions regarding the domain, where you usually want to study and question everything. And again, this is usually easier after a first iteration because you have something prior, you have concrete work to start from and some specific errors to fix. And for the last 2 years, I've extensively read on the topic and the history of money and currency. It has opened many possibilities for Dinero V2, and I'm really happy about that. Would I have been interested in that for a V1? Probably not, because let's be honest, what also makes you want to study topics like that is because you have something to do, you have something concrete to do, you have tractions, you have people asking for it. So that's really what I liked with this V1, is that it showed me that there was demand, that people wanted it, that people needed it, and it helped, it created a community of basically brains thinking of the same problem at the same time. So it helped me, and it made it a community work rather than just me in my cave working on my little thing and making it perfect before putting it out for the world to use. And so ultimately, what I learned is that it all comes down to kind of 4 pillars where all problems come from, and which are basically the North Stars that you want to have in your head. Scalability, flexibility, agnosticism, and developer experience. So scalability, we've seen it with the tree shaking issue, or the fact that I was not using TypeScript. You don't know what the future holds. In 2008, I did not know where JavaScript was going, and I don't know where JavaScript is going to be in 2022 or 2030. But you can try to study for that and try to look at what people are doing to not imagine, but kind of prepare for the future. Having static typing, I could have known in 2018 that TypeScript would probably be a good choice. Tree shaking was already, people were already tree shaking their libraries in 2018. So being aware of the ecosystem or where things are going is also important when you're building a library, because it tells you whether your library is going to age well or not. There are many libraries out there, and I'm not going to name names, but that were once popular and now are no longer because not because something better came around, but because their design is no longer adapted to today's practices. So flexibility, we've seen that issue with the different exponents, for example, or the amounts and numbers. So flexibility is about providing solutions that don't lock your users in and that let them bend your library to their needs. Basically, if you realize that you're making you're having values or you're having types that are fixed, that are hard-coded, maybe you should think twice. Like with the different exponents, that's something that I could have foreseen when I decided to write it, like hard-code it in my code and see, hey, that may be something that someone wants to change down the road. So that's really important. There is a limit. You cannot be ever flexible for everything. But where you want to be more opinionated is in the structure of your code and maybe the data structures that you use. But anything that you can let the user change is usually a good idea. Agnosticism, so that comes hand in hand with flexibility. So think about the Internationalization API or the rates for the convert method coming from a REST API. Those are like really opinionated choices. And it goes even further than opinions. It's like you're making a choice of, we're going to use that very specific thing. And it makes the library not agnostic at all. It makes it make choices, really specific, opinionated choices. And choices like that usually have side effects. And that can be a real big issue. So you want to remain agnostic. You want to make sure that you don't make choices that you can leave up to the developers. And finally, DX, developer experience. So that's extremely important. Think of the tree shaking issue, TypeScript issue. You have to think about the experience for your developers. Developers today have their VS Code with IntelliSense. They have a whole bunch of plugins when they're using Vue or React. They have DevTools, etc. They have awesome tooling. If you're not providing, if what you're providing is that library that is not going to be as user-friendly for them or developer-friendly than the rest of the things that they're using, it's probably going to diminish the traction that you can get. Again, a library that does not have TypeScript, like first-class TypeScript support when it mostly caters to TypeScript developers, it's going to get less traction. If you don't have something like tree shaking, it's going to have less traction. If you don't have great documentation, if you're not fast at replying to GitHub issues, all that constitutes DX, developer experience. So that's mostly the four pillars of like the four North Stars to keep in mind. But my advice would be like, keep those in mind. Like those pillars are important, but don't let them keep you from shipping. All the things I learned, I got them from real feedback. I would have never thought of many of those use cases or even some solutions without having my V1 and people confronting to that V1. So it's like with many products, even physical products or anything, like use your V1 to confirm your assumptions. Use it to confirm your assumptions and to confirm that there is a need. And then create a V2 to make a reliable, long-lasting API. You don't have to make something incredible for your V1. Just make it stable and be ready to support it. But it's okay if it's not perfect. React 1 was not perfect. Vue 1 was not perfect. Angular 1 was not perfect. And that's okay. You can evolve. You can move on to something better. But with a V1 that you ship faster, you actually have an idea of whether it's actually worth your time. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening to me. And now I will answer all the questions that you have. So if you're interested, I've put a few links here. The first one is the talk that I told you about earlier about floating point math in JavaScript and in many other languages for that matter. And the second one is if you want to check Dinero.js on GitHub, the organization. So I'm going to check your questions now. I'm just going to show this little sponsor screen. Thank you to all the sponsors. And I'm going to open the questions. So, all right. So, Cone Peters, I hope I'm saying it right. is asking, when will V2 be released? So that's the $1 million question. So I'm currently working on V2. It's at a really advanced state. I would say that it will, so an alpha, so an unstable, right? But an alpha with many things not implemented will probably be ready. When are we? June? Yeah, probably end of July. I'm not making promises. This is hard to do and conciliate with work. But yeah, my goal right now, and I really I sped up development lately. But I hope to be able to put an alpha out by the end of July. And when the alpha is out, I will actually accept contributions from the outside to that release, to that V2 release. I want to make sure that the core is ready, that all the decisions, because I'm not fully, I haven't taken all the decisions right now on the way the core should be architected. So I want to finish that beforehand so I can explain it to people and so I can argument my choices. But after that is done, I will have plenty of tasks left to do. Like if anybody is happy with doing tooling, like bundling with rollup or all that kind of stuff, or wants to do Sauce Labs end-to-end tests, I'm really, really happy to let it to someone else. Because yeah, that's a lot of work. So yeah, to answer you in shorter terms, an alpha by the end of July, probably. All right. And then, okay, so I don't see any other questions. We have 10 minutes left. So if you have, so great talk. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to yours. So if you have any other question, go ahead. Go ahead right now. You can still ask them on Twitter. I can show you back the slide. I will put this, I will tweet the slides later. So you can follow me at frontstuff_io, and ask me questions there if you are too shy to ask them right now. All right. I don't see any more questions. Let's leave a couple of minutes. So most of you said that you prefer functional programming. I'd be interested in why. If you have answers for that, besides the tree shaking, I'm interested. Thank you. It's cleaner and more readable. Yes. It is definitely cleaner and more readable, but still, so cleaner and more readable is kind of subjective. Even though I share that, this is definitely something quite subjective. I've also heard developers tell me, oh, in JavaScript, functional programming feels like a toy, like using something like Lambda feels like a toy, and it feels like functional programming is really interesting when you're doing pure math, which is also very opinionated. Testability, yes, I definitely agree. So I'm writing Dinero in a way that so you have the core, so you have all the methods that are implemented in the core and they're tested there. And then you have Dinero.js Chainable and Dinero.js functional programming, and they're just plumbing, which are leaning on the core. But the core itself is functional. And that's so good. That's really nice, because then all you have to do to test the libraries, like both libraries, is just integration tests, where you don't really you don't really care on logic, but it's more about how the whole things function, or in what environment. That's definitely awesome to test functional methods. What would be the best things that is related to having a popular package? The best things. All right. So to be honest, it gives you an awesome brand. If you have a popular package and you are applying to a company, like a high profile company, That's definitely a plus. Like, it makes you stand out. It teaches you a lot, whether it's being rigorous with the work that you do, but also it teaches you about saying no. People will ask you a lot of things in issues. They will ask you to support this and this and that, and you have to learn to say no first. You cannot say yes to everything, but also to think beyond the ask. Like, when someone told me, hey, that convert method is bound to a REST API, I want to use the SOAP protocol. Like, ultimately, that's not like, you should not be making like a REST connector, a GraphQL connector, a SOAP connector, or whatever. What you want is basically invert control. In that case, you want to let people do whatever they want to fetch the data, and then care about making the conversion. So that teaches you a lot about software, because ultimately that's your responsibility and people have access to you. So yeah, that's a really great thing when you have a popular package, is that it will make you think a lot and fix actual issues. All right. How much do you feel the limitations of the current design were due to scratching your own itch as opposed to thinking about alternative use cases upfront? A lot. It was definitely that. I basically made something to fix my problems, and I tried to make it nice, but then I was like, okay, this works, this is in production, let's just push it on GitHub. And I did not take that much time thinking, oh, maybe people use it differently. You know, you just have code, and you have a lot of code, and you just decide, hey, I'll just dust it off a little bit, make sure that things are clean, and I don't embarrass myself too much with my code, and push it to production, but push it to GitHub and make it open source and put it on NPM. But yeah, to answer you quite, I think they are linked though, because when you're scratching your own itch, you're not thinking about alternative use cases up front. That's the thing. But again, you rarely do. You usually start by scratching your own itch, and you decide, hey, many other people may need that. The thing is that it's easier to think about other use cases or ponder your assumptions when you're a team. But again, as you've seen, like Angular 1 was backed by Google, and still they made major architecture mistakes, which led them to rethink the entire thing. So yes, ultimately, you are fixing a problem that seems to be obvious, and you're probably doing it well, but then you learn from the outside, and you learn that the world does not look exactly like your world. So yeah, I think that goes hand in hand. But yes, definitely, I just built something to fix my problem. I pushed it to open source, and then this is what happened. All right, any other questions? I have a couple of minutes left. So if you have any question, either ask now and I can reply live, or you can ask on Twitter. Yeah, I'll be on Twitter probably all afternoon, so don't hesitate to ask. Let's show a few sponsors in the meantime. All right, so if there are no last minute questions, I'm going to sign off. Definitely reach me on Twitter, frontstuff_io, or you can type my first name and my last name, you will find me. I'll be really happy to chat with you about that and many other things. All right, cool. Peace and talk to you later. Bye.